Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 past 1, and we can start this webinar. Welcome for this webinar on robotic and TEF-Health. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Jean-François Menudet. I'm from the Hospice Civil de Lyon. It's a university hospital based in Lyon, in France. And in this hospital, I'm responsible for exploring and testing the potential of robotics in many areas in hospital. And I also have the pleasure of coordinating the robotics task force within TEF-Health, a European consortium that I will introduce in a moment. So today's webinar is dedicated to SMEs developing robotic solutions for the healthcare sector. And our goal today is to show you how TEF-Health can support you from early testing of robotics in hospital settings to validation, compliance, and preparation for market entry of your innovations. This is a truly collaborative effort, and you will see it brings together several partners across the TEF-Health consortium. And during the rest of the session, these partners will introduce themselves, or present their services, and explain how they work. We can work together on your project. So once again, thank you very much for being with us today. I'm very happy to have you here, and I hope this session helps you identify your very concrete opportunities to collaborate with TEF-Health on your robotic innovation. So the agenda is first to introduce what is TEF-Health. So you have the context of these webinars. Then we'll focus on robotics task force, why we created that group in the consortium. And we will also present many case studies to illustrate how our services can be useful for SMEs in different applications of robotics. Can be surgery, telemedicine, exoskeleton, logistics, social robots. A lot of case study, very concrete project to showcase how we can propose and help you in your project. And finally, we will give you some brief introduction to how you can apply and search for the different TEF-Health services. And then obviously we'll take time to answer your question. So first, what are the TEF? TEF stands for Testing and Experimentation Facilities. And there are 4 TEF in the Europe today on 4 strategic areas: health, advanced materials, cities, and agriculture. And there is one common goal for all this initiative is to support AI and robotics, and especially the SMEs are developing this kind of innovation to help them to introduce this innovation into the European market. And as you know, AI and robotics have some challenging regulation. And this is why the tests are aimed is to provide some kind of agile validation process, some support on regulation, and finally having this opportunity to have fast track to a market in Europe. And TEF-Health is one of these 4 initiatives dedicated to healthcare. So we are really focused on health AI and robotics in healthcare settings. It's a big investment of the European Commission, a 60 million project with the participation of 9 member states. And at the end, it's 52 organizations gathering and offering more than 300 services to SMEs developing health AI and robotics solutions. And these services are really about helping SMEs to reach the market. And for that, we have different levels of services. Some are related to data and in silico validation and includes, for example, accessing data sets coming from hospital or any kind of data set that can be useful in healthcare. We also kind of experimentation, which is test bed experimentation in physical environment, replicating some healthcare settings. You will see some example later on. And we have also a real-world experimentation in hospital, for example, and includes clinical research investigation that are mandatory, for example, for MDR and CE marking. And on the top of that, we have the support for regulation, whether it can be MDR, AI Act, or any kind of regulation applying for robotics and AI. So that's the context of the TEF-Health. And within this very broad spectrum of application and innovation in healthcare, we decided to have a focus on robotics. And one of the reason for that is that robotics is very diverse and a very active field in Europe, and you can find many applications of robotics in healthcare. And for that, we try to figure some categories of application. And today we'll present mainly these 5 categories and application. The first one is in the operating room with surgery, interventional imaging, where robotics can bring some great features to the surgeon. There is also the telemedicine application of robotics, for example, in imaging. Another important category of robotics in healthcare is exoskeleton, and you will see some nice example of project in this field. And also, besides medical applications, you have also application in logistics of robots. So today you have hospital having these robots for transportation of supply within the hospital, for example. And finally, a more prospective but promising application is the introduction of social robots in the hospital. So when we made we have this constat on the current boom in robotics, we dedicated groups of a work group on that field of robotics. And this group, what we call the Robotics Task Force, is a group with the 9 partners, can be hospital or research lab and technological organization. And it's really a team of experts which are dedicated to the validation and deployment of healthcare robotics. So beside the logos of our institution, it's some people who will take the talk and the speech today, introduce themselves later on during the case studies. Our mission on the robotics task force is really to provide some testing services that meet the very specific needs of robotic technologies. And for example, robotics compared to AI obviously has some hardware requiring some specific validation. There is some stakes about human-robot interaction, which can include biomechanics. You need to validate and test a robot, you need some physical testing. For example, for surgical robots, you need an operating room. And that's the kind of service and infrastructure we propose in the TEF-Health, especially in robotics. And our goal also is to connect SMEs with experts in the different field, can provide tailored advices and state-of-the-art methods to validate robotics solution. And finally, to give also access to infrastructure, and we'll see some nice example later on, but can be simulated environment or real-world testing environment. But in any case, some environment very useful for robotics and the physical nature of robotics. So if you are an SMEs, we believe there are at least 2 cases where it can be interesting to get in touch. The first one is you are dedicated to the healthcare sector, you are developing a robotic solution, especially for one application, and you need to advance the TRL of your solution. Another case is that you have already a mature robotics technology developed in another fields, for example, industry, and you want to enter the healthcare sector. And for that, you need to validate the market fit and some regulatory compliance. In both cases, our services and the TEF-Health in the world, and especially the task force on robotics, can propose different kind of evaluation and regulatory testing to answer the specific needs. It can be technical testing, it can be usability, it can be clinical investigation, In any case, we can provide this kind of testing using the real and simulated hospital settings, and you will see the example later on. We can also provide access to healthcare professionals to have some feedback, even in some case, patient feedback if you need, because your project is turned toward the patient. And with the support within the certification and CE marking, you can have a strong backup for your different projects. And I mentioned also the fact that we are working not only on physical side, but also on in silico simulation. And I'll let the floor to Fabrice from TUM who will introduce this kind of service.
So good morning, my name is Fabrice Morin. I'm working at the Technical University of Munich at the chair of Robotics, Artificial Intelligence, and Real-Time Systems. Thank you, Jean-François. As you said, we offer some virtual services, especially based on simulation, which are I believe very relevant for robotics application. As you know, you probably use simulation at lower TRLs when you develop your solutions to basically guide your design and develop your code. But at higher TRLs, you can also use simulation to evaluate how changes in your code impact the performance of your system, or even you use simulation in your processes of integration and deployment for your products. Now, this is obviously interesting and we can help you with that, but there is an aspect that is particularly important to take into account. It is the fact that things like continuous improvement and change management are actually regulatory requirements, especially for medical devices. And in that context, you may need to produce specific documentation or specific traceable items so that you can address regulatory audits with a better position. And that's exactly what we want to offer. We want to offer services to you to co-design basically the type of workflows, based on simulation that will allow you to address regulatory requirements. And obviously, you know your product, you know your industry, but we are there to basically co-design those processes with you so that you are not left to your own devices when it comes to these simulation environments that become more and more fundamental everywhere. So if you are interested, do not hesitate to get in touch with us. And with that, I yield the floor back to Jean-François.
Thanks, Fabrice. So as you can see, our value proposition is to provide some very tailored and integrated services. And if we take the example of surgical robots, we can work on very early stage on validation on datasets, so purely on virtual side, as Fabrice also mentioned. But we can also aggregate some services around usability studies, and you will see some example just next. We can also provide some kind of EMC testing, electromagnetic compatibility testing, because we have some partners able to provide that. We have partners also in TEF-Health providing regulatory support and clinical studies. So at the end, we can design with you kind of journey for your product and your project to support at every stages. It has to bring it from TRL 5, 6, depending on your project, until TRL 8 to 9. And really the goal of TEFL is to supporting this journey in maturing your technology and your solution. So after this introduction, we wanted to present some very concrete case studies because we believe it's the best way to understand the potential help you can find with TEF-Health. And for that, we introduce the same categories I mentioned earlier. And so we start with the surgical field with Isabelle from CHU Grenoble.
Hello. You can see on the left-hand side of this of your screen all the partner involved in this kind of services. As you know, many surgical robots are currently being developed in Europe for a wide variety of medical applications. Within TEF-Health, we offer a range of services that support each stage of the development of this robotic system. First, we can provide simple rental to a simulated operating room to test your device in a realistic environment. This technical test can include the use of phantoms to account for spatial constraints with other equipment. The simulating operating room may be used for education purposes also. We can also record videos of your technical or functional test sequences for later analysis, either independently or with assistance from our team. The next step is to organize workshops with end users in order to gather feedback or improvement suggestions for your initial robotic solution. These workshops also help evaluate the organizational impact, the impact on the patient care, and the accessibility of your solution. The earlier this step is completed, the more suitable your product will be for your future clinical use. And of course, do not forget the regulatory phase. To obtain the CE mark, you must conduct one or more formative evaluations, followed by a summative evaluation to complete the required usability report. We can support you by writing test scenarios and connecting you with healthcare professionals to assess your solution. The final step towards CE mark is often the clinical investigation, which several TEF-Health hospitals include in their service offering. This includes writing the clinical protocol, submitting it to the local regulatory authorities, and ensuring its follow-up, setting up the study, performing the biostatistical analysis, and writing the final study report. Next slide, please. I will first present a use case where my hospital was involved. It illustrates the last service, a multi-centric clinical investigation. Imactis is a French startup whose robotic solution integrates an electromagnetic navigation system for CT-guided interventional radiology procedures in the thoraco-abdominal region. Imactis had just obtained its CE mark, but needed a more complete evaluation of the clinical benefits across a large number of patients and radiologists that have been conducting during the initial CE mark clinical investigation. The clinical study was conducted in 8 university hospitals across France. 4,050 patients were included, and 3 to 4 junior or senior radiologists per hospital used this robotic solution. Then the demonstration of clinical benefits was therefore highly convincing and has been used for marketing purposes. Finally, within TEF-Health, multi-clinical investigations are available with hospitals across Europe. It's okay for me.
Thank you, Isabelle. So, a next case study on surgical robots is about the so-called summative evaluation requiring for CE marking. It's related to the validation of human factor safety, and it's related to a specific norm in the medical device field. In this project we had in a hospital in Lyon, it was a project with a startup called Keranova, producing a robot for cataract surgery. And the goal of this summative evaluation is to validate on a panel of surgeons that the device is safe to use related to the human interface interaction. So for that, we provided this panel of surgeons based on the healthcare professional in our hospital. We developed some test scenarios with the startup based on their risk analysis to introduce some hazards in the scenario and to see how healthcare professional reacts confront to this hazard. We proposed the organization and moderation of all the test sessions. with a human factor specialist, and we could also use our simulated operating room to realize all this test session. At the end, our human factor specialist was able to provide a root cause analysis of all the events which has been observed during the test session. And based on this root cause analysis, the company was able to conclude on the safety of its device related to human factor risk analysis. So it was a key point for these startups to have this kind of report for the CE marking and the files associated to that. That is two nice examples of what we can propose on surgical robots on the validation phase, usability and clinical investigation. We can work also on different kind of robots and especially telemedicine robots. And I'll let the floor to Joao from IPN.
Thank you, Jean-François. Good morning, everyone. So I'm João Quintas, the coordinator of the R&D team of the automatics lab in IPN. And when we are developing here telemedicine robots or robots for telemedicine, it's also related with the previous type of robots, with the distinction that we are not focusing only on the surgical interventions, and we have a hard requirement of using a connection that basically can put together two places that are remotely or distance placed in connected to allow the human operator to operate the robotic end. So we are using these for different meanings, from monitoring health conditions to health diagnostics. And in this case, we have other partners in TEF involved alongside IPN, focusing on three typologies of services that come from a multidisciplinary team that is working together to help improving the maturity level of these technologies. So in particular, in TEF-Health, we have been focusing on the usability testing, formative and summative evaluation for these type of technologies, supporting the clinical studies and the clinical investigations that are also required to get the CE mark of these type of solutions. And of course, supporting the design and development of solutions that can come to us in a bit earlier stage in TRL 4-5 that we can support based on our competencies and capacity to steer the technical teams or the entrepreneurs in developing the process on how to build these type of solutions. We can show you some use cases or a case study that it's coming from the last 10 years of working together with academic partners and companies in this area of telerobotics. So in this case, we are piloting a guided robot or a robot for tele-ultrasound system with collaboration of the hospitals in Coimbra, which we are now reaching a phase where we are conducting the clinical investigation studies, which are a mandatory part of the development life cycle to get the evidence that these technologies are safe, they are clinical effective, and for that we will also need the collaboration with the clinicians that are experts in this case ultrasounds, and essentially we are providing here the services, two type of services, mainly for the clinical investigation. It's one, and also the regulatory support to submit this clinical investigation study to the national competence authorities, and prepare all the technical files that are needed for going in the next stages of certification. So that should be all for this use case. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I let Majid from CER to introduce Exoskeleton.
Well, thank you, Jean-François, and hi everyone. My name is Majid Hihi. I'm from CELETI, a research technology organization which is based in Grenoble, France, and it's part of a large technology development campus where health technology has really a great role to play. And in this exoskeleton overview, I'd like to share some services that can be provided by a few partners in the consortium, so that would include CEE, and also, of course, Politecnico di Milano and the Grenoble University Hospital, both as co-developers, but also as analyzers and potentially people and groups that can support program development. And so our services include the testing of exoskeletons, lower limbs, upper limbs, doing movement analysis for health evaluation, but also for sports applications. The group and the TEF-Health group here has the capacity to conduct clinical studies, both for their design and their development, but also for their evaluations. And importantly as well for this field, we have the capacity to develop and evaluate algorithms and software that are important for movement actuation control. So if Jean-François, you move to the next slide, we can here provide an example and a case study of an exoskeleton, a 4-limb exoskeleton that has been developed to actually be part of a system that could be controlled by a brain-computer interface, actually by tetraplegic patients. And this exoskeleton was developed by also research technology organization, CEA List, and the system was at TRL4, so already all the components were actually put together, but never tested in the clinic. So the service that was provided there, and that can be provided to the SME throughout Europe, is those that have been put forward with this particular BCI exoskeleton control to be able to work with a multidisciplinary team from engineers to medical doctors, but also a regulatory filing team that can actually help clinical evaluations in this particular case of a newly developed exoskeleton and of an implantable brain-computer interface system. In this particular case study, the clinical evaluation was tested at the Clinatec facility in Grenoble, which is part of the TEF-Health consortium. And importantly, then after analysis of the results and the feedback was provided to roboticians and to clinicians within the clinical evaluation, but also outside. And what the slide shows here is the exoskeleton itself, which is a 4-limb exoskeleton that has embedded computer for signal processing and embedded battery, and also orthotics to be actually able to work with paraplegic patients. And on the right side are examples and pictures with a tetraplegic participant that through his brain-computer interface was able to control walking, and this so-called 1D control, so walk or not walk. And then with the upper limbs was able to control the movement in different directions with left arm and right arm. And importantly, this was done through dedicated AI-based algorithms and softwares. The teams are still up and running, rather strong, and available for development or co-development of such softwares for the interested SMEs. And in our particular case, this work has been published in a well-known journal, and the BCI system has been actually provided and licensed to a company, and the exoskeleton licensing is under discussion. So it gives you an idea how our TEF-Health platform can actually take programs that are at the lower tier as 4 to 6 and take them to the next steps. So Jean-François, thank you, and maybe we can move to our next colleague.
Thank you, Majid. So the next category is outside the medical application, but really important to for the workflow in the hospital. It's about logistics. We can see more and more projects of robots in corridor and alley of the hospital to transport some stuff in the hospital. So we believe it was important to have this part of application in TFS as well. And you have three partners involved in this kind of application, IPN, Fraunhofer, and IIS and HCL at the hospital side. And probably more hospital we can also be mobilized if required. Our services are first to validate the functional and performance of this kind of robots, especially the autonomous mobile robots, in simultaneous environment that mimic the hospital settings. But we can also work earlier on some design phase with end users, can be nurses, it can be people in the pharmacy, all the logistic environment, and evaluate impact and acceptability of this kind of solution in real world because workers in hospital, it's a little bit different from workers in factories, different kind of work organization, different culture as well. So you need to be careful about how you deploy and how you develop robots for application in a hospital. And a first example is one that we conduct in our hospital in Lyon. The need was to have some robots to transport and to deliver all the surgical instrumentation in a new building with many different stories and a lot of measures to travel. So the idea was to develop the autonomous mobile robot, and we can see the first version of this robot here. And the goal of the SME was to validate the solution in real-world settings with healthcare professional. So for this testing, for example, we recruit a panel of healthcare professional, and we went in their work environment, so the operating rooms. We were really in the field, and we moderate all the test session with a human factor specialist and the robotic engineers. Both were people from our team, so we gather special technical expertise in human sciences, expertise to analyze all the results and all the feedbacks we gathered from this kind of testing. Very instructing because when you are in real world environment, you can see many different things that you cannot have in your simulated environment. And finally, all these feedbacks has been synthesized and resumed in a report, a report that the SME is developing the solution use afterwards to improve some areas of this solution. So clearly on this kind of project, we were able to move the solution from tier 6 or 7 to now a solution at tier 8. Then that's the solution that will be deployed in a hospital at the beginning of next year. Another example of logistic is by IPN. So I'll let Joao take the floor again.
Thank you. So in this case study, we are providing a service to a startup company that is working with the objective of essentially developing these small form robots that they are mobile robots that their intended use essentially is to operate in outdoors for tasks that involve last mile delivery and logistics. And what we are supporting the company here is to validate in a real world setting or putting together the conditions that can be more closely related with the expected operational scenario, with where the robot have the task of delivering like small packages containing medications. For example, you can imagine a scenario where you have a neighborhood pharmacy, and the patient have problems in mobility, and you require that these medicines are arrived to the patient. So the expected use case here is use this type of mobile robots to guarantee this last mile delivery. So in this case, IPN is supporting the company more on the development stage. So from the technical perspective of the design and development of the technology itself, but focused more on the testing and validation phases where this technology has already been validated in lab, so by the company with their own resources. And now we are providing the service to support bringing this validation to the outdoors. So we can set up the scenario where we can validate this intended use for this technology. Yeah, so essentially that's it.
Thank you. So let's jump to the last category, so social robots. And it's Marta from Polimi who will present that.
Yes, hello. So thank you, Jean-François. So this is Marta Gandolla for Politecnico, as said, Politecnico di Milano in Italy. So here, this category is involving the partners that you see listed on the left-hand side, and here are a list of services that somehow are replying what we are saying up to now, but focused on social robotics. So we have a first part about focus group and interviews with experts and stakeholders of the application that you want to focus on, and design workshop with the end user, specifically with the persons that are gonna use the robot. And so what we want to do is to adapt the robotic solution for the healthcare sector. So usually in this field, what it happens is that we have the robot or the social robot, and then we want to find a suitable application, for example, for the healthcare sector in our case. Then we have services like functional and performance testings, both in simulating the environment and in the lab setting and in the real environment. And here I want to have a particular focus on those last two services, where the first one is the human-machine interaction, design and test, because the robot per se gives a service, given that they are service robots, but in the context of a social robot. So we need to have a proper integration between the person using the robot and the robot itself. And then, of course, to evaluate impact and acceptability in the real world, so going up to the last levels of TRL. As an example that I'm going to show, so here is the use case is the deploy of service robots in nursing homes to improve quality of life. So here we have the example of the robot. We will see the Tiago robot from Puzzle Robotics, and we want to use it in the context of the healthcare sector, particularly speaking about nursing homes. So, no, sorry, go back one.
Sorry.
Now here is the exact. So can you go back to point one? But anyway, okay, so the services that we have provided here is, first of all, focus group and panel of experts. So what we have done, we were talking about Italy, as you can see. So we contacted different nursing homes and we gave interviews, and then we get the data, and to go for the second service, that is to get. Can you go to the next one? Sorry. So to analyze the data that we get, so from the needs Echo, thank you very much. So the identification of the needs of the application of the service robot, the social robot within the healthcare sector. And here is data analysis with respect to what we got from the focus group and panel of experts, and what is available on the market and on the scientific literature, and trying to find the best match where to go for. So, for example, here we can see that we have identified that a social robot in the context of nursing home should go for physical assistance, stimulation and rehabilitation, and entertainment and cognitive stimulation. Next, please. So what we've done is to implement actually those applications with the Tiago robot. So we can see gaming, so playing chess. Then we can see walking assistance on the bottom right, and then the identification of possible falls, so people that get up when they cannot, with the use of the camera. This is something that has been mentioned before, being those robots used in the healthcare sector. What we need to take into account is that we are dealing with frail people and a spatial environment, let's say. So everything should be, particularly on the data collection and test of the solutions, needs to be guided by the current law in every state, and should pass through the ethical committee board. And so we give help also in this stage. The last point that we used is to design the human-machine interaction. So, for example, so it is a video, the right-hand side one is going okay. So the interaction is, so the headset falls a little bit, but the interaction is both vocal and also physical, and with the feedback and so on and so forth. So the design of the interaction of a non-technical person, and most of all of a frail person in our case with the robot, should be guided with particular attention. And that's all. So I held back the floor to the colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last case study on this kind of robots with a company called Enchanted Tools, with developing this robot with very specific design, and we deployed very similar methodology than previously explained by Marta. We work on a design of interaction and the place of this kind of robots in the hospital setting. So we are really more oriented on healthcare professional, how these kind of robots can help them in their daily activities. And for that, we work with the company, with the healthcare professional, and we introduced also in the team some expertise coming from sociology. We work also in design thinking manner to co-develop use cases with the healthcare professional. And we are now in this phase of co-design the scenarios of testing. And the objective in the next months will be to test this scenario with the robots, first in simulated environment, so in physical environment, but fake one. And if things goes well, we go to real life settings in the hospital to gather some very more detailed feedbacks from the end user, in this case the healthcare professional. So this conclude the case studies part. We hope it has been useful to illustrate how TEF-Health can really bring some very strong acceleration to your project to validate your solution. And for the last part, we just wanted to explain how we can work together. And the first step is probably for you to go to our website. You will see especially a button search for surveys. It's a nice way to explore the catalog of services. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, there are more than 300 services but you can use some filter to filter by service provider, by different categories, by offering. You can type some keyword, so maybe you can try to enter a robot, and you will see some services directly related to robotics. So that's the first way to have some insight on how you can find support in TEF-Health. Another thing we wanted to mention is that TEF-Health has some open calls to apply for price reduction on some services offered by the consortium. It will depend, the eligibility for the discount will depend on your country, the level of maturity of project. You can see the detail in the different call for paper call online. You will see the place here to find the information. And in any case, at the end, if you want to apply for a service under call 1 or call 2, you will have to register to the TEF-Health platform. And we wanted to show you how it can be done quite easily. We have a small video for tutorial to explain how it works. I think it could be really useful for any one of you who can be interested in the service we presented to look at this video and understand the pathway for you to get in touch with us.